of the year. I love that we started today with this song "You Gotta Be" by Desiree. I feel like it's almost an instruction manual for life, which is one of those things that's a little bit hard to come by. So definitely encourage you to check out those lyrics and look at those words. As you come in, definitely feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We want to know who you are, where you're coming from, and where you're working from today. So our quote for the day is, "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." I think this is another one of those, anthems for life, for every meeting, for every interaction. And we'll hear more from Jackie and from our speaker about what this quote means. Our I4cp membership just continues and continues to grow. We're so proud of the many logos that we have on this screen. If you're new to membership, do a little shout out here in the chat. We'd love to welcome you in as your first time as well. If you haven't joined membership, reach out to us. We'd love to see your logo on this collection of amazing companies. I am so excited about our first Next Practices Now conference in Phoenix that we have coming up. This is the first time since COVID that we've all been able to gather in person. And after it feels like a very long winter already, I know it's only February. I cannot wait to see so many of your faces in Phoenix. If you haven't registered yet, there's still time. We are running out, so reach out to us soon and can't wait to see us. Most exciting, Dan Pink is our newest speaker to join the lineup, but we obviously have so many incredible speakers, so we hope to see you there. I also want to celebrate Black History Month. It's something that's so important to us here at I4cp. If there's something special that your organization is doing to celebrate Black History Month, we'd love to see that in the chat. And special shout out to Eric Davis, who always creates these beautiful, beautiful backgrounds that you'll see some of our I4cpers on the call using. And we are really grateful for that as another way to allow us to remember and to celebrate. We have an incredible call scheduled today that's always moderated by Jackie Robertson, our Chief Diversity Officer Board Director, and also the Global Head of Talent, Diversity, and Inclusion at William & Blair, and just such a thought leader in her field. Eric Davis, who I already mentioned, is our Creative Director and a Senior Editor here at I4cp, and myself. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat while Jackie and Eric run this call for us. If you have questions throughout the conversation, please just share them in the chat. I'll encourage you to come off of mute, and I'll also help filter those questions out for us. We know that we changed the schedule a little bit for our DE&I Next Practice calls for 2022. So please note those, make sure you get those on their calendar. We want to see you on these calls all year long. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie.
Nina, thank you so much. I am so excited about our guest speaker today. I can't wait to engage you in some wonderful conversation, Nancy. I'm hoping that you will all indulge me in what I typically do, just offer a few words to think about. So I'm sure you all have heard the old adage, a picture is worth 1,000 words. There's something about a visual that enhances cognitive understanding and appreciation. Now, don't get me wrong, I can get lost in a good novel. I can conjure up images with extraordinary vivid color and crispness. But there's something about an image that brings to life the oral or written communication. The memories of these images remain a tangible, albeit profoundly visceral feeling. So why is that? We know that 93% of human communication is nonverbal. 90% of information transferred to the brain is visual. 70% of sensory receptors are in your eyes. 40% of people respond better to the visual. So as humans, it seems like we're just wired such that visual images have a sort of permanent appeal. Also, as humans, we strive for this ideal image, the image that portrays us in the best light. Is that a good thing? Or do you find it concerning? How does this notion of the ideal image play out in the workplace? DE&I practitioners remind us of the importance of bringing our best selves, our most authentic selves to work each and every day. So how does that work when you layer in the perceived need to bring this ideal image versus your authentic selves to work? Now, make no mistake about it, your organizations all have an ideal image that underscores how you're expected to show up. But didn't hybrid working relax these standards? What about the cameo appearances of our children and our pets running across the Zoom screens? DE&I practitioners, you have your work cut out for you. I was recently reading this Time magazine article, and they go on to say that we've long understood that movies and magazines and television damage a teen's body image by reinforcing the thin ideal. And this generation has entered and has become well established in our workforces today. And we still don't know the full impact of social media on body confidence. So I ask you, does that translate to confidence in performance at work? Does stress of not performing to an ideal image affect wellness? For at least a decade, educators have argued that social media's biggest threat was its likeness to a bathroom wall, letting teens sling insults with the recklessness that comes only with anonymity. So are we fooling ourselves by believing that this teenage phenomenon has not carried over into the psyche of who is now our youngest generation in the workforce? The article goes on to provide examples of how social media has also become a toxic mirror. Now, this might seem a harsh description, but think about this. Did you know that there are businesses that help you bring your best image to Facebook and to Instagram? That's a thing. Did you know that there are businesses that will create ideal images for your Facebook posts of your pets posing comfortably against a picture-perfect holiday backdrop? And honestly, I'm not sure our pets care, but admittedly, these are the holiday cards I continue to save year after year. Seriously, I'll throw away a CVS or a Walgreens holiday card in a hot minute, but the cards containing family photos or photos of people's pets, I save those for years. Remember, 90% of the information transferred to the brain is visual. 70% of sensory receptors are in your eyes. Now, I'm only a voyeur on Facebook. I don't post. Call me antiquated if you wish, but don't judge me. I'd rather spend more time making a fantastic dinner that my family enjoys. I have no need to save an image of those dinners for posterity. Yet, my younger family members will painstakingly arrange every food item, ensure their plate looks perfect, take a picture, post it, and then indulge the rest of us by saying a blessing over the food. It's as if the event never happened if it's not captured on social media, the ideal, perfectly curated image. Is that a good thing, or should we be concerned? Layer the stress of living up to this ideal image with the last 2 years of pandemic stress. Is it any wonder that we are all talking about wellness and well-being? Are we truly allowing our employees to show up as they are? And isn't this a flag that DE&I practitioners carry, encouraging leaders and employees to be authentic? I was reading an article by Christine Harches, who holds a mirror to the toxic mirror, if you will, and the illusion that parents create by posting the perfect family pictures. She comments on social media and its tendency to show everyone else's parenting successes. She says, has brought me to a new kind of parenting depression. She comments that you seem like your family life is so much less chaotic than mine. You seem like the perfect parents with perfect children, and it's too easy to forget that this is a filtered version of you. And that in between that post of you on the shores of another beach, on another Hawaiian vacation, and the post of your daughter winning the Pulitzer Prize, nearly a whole month of unaccounted time has passed, but not too many posts of boring day-to-day tasks of just living. Her avatar illusion, if you will. She says, my Facebook self is an illusion. She says, my lipstick never bleeds. I'm always wearing makeup, and she never wears the faded plaid pajama pants that are a staple of her weekend existence. You know, we post the carefully selected vacation photos. Many of us have been slaves to the negative self-image voice. You know that voice. No, 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 don't post that one. My stomach looks fat. Nope, don't post that one. My arms look too flabby. And then in comes the little handy cropping tool. And if that doesn't get it, you can use Photoshop. She comments on how much life is left behind, so much of reality. What happens to the rest of those days, those weeks, those years in between the beautifully created and curated and spell check posts? Life is real life, people. The emotional exhaustion we experience on the daily, the emotional exhaustion that drives us away from our real lives to spend more time online, searching for an escape, searching for fulfillment. She says, yet our clicks and our like buttons only perpetuate the cycle of destruction. Let me ask you this. What about the actresses and the business leaders and the other wealthy parents charged in the US college entry fraud? Remember that? Some might say that they were too caught up in perpetuating this ideal family image. Some other people have some other choice words, but that's another discussion. I ask all the DE&I practitioners on this call, are you woke to this phenomenon in your organization? How can we reinforce the importance of showing up as your authentic self when we're competing with the digital platforms of this ideal avatar-infused selves? I loved Christine's comment. She said, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods, but is it okay to covet their elusive happiness? In this life, where we're measured by how we spend the majority of our days, then for most of us, we will not be measured by our Facebook posts. They're just the highlight reel, the elusive 1%. Instead, she says, we'll be measured by what we do every day when nobody's watching, when no one else sees, by our small and private acts, the acts that are of kindness, that will not earn us likes or shares, but ultimately make us better people. We are more than the sum of our successes. I've often said that organizations where we work are merely a microcosm of society. People bring their deepest rooted beliefs about the world, politics, their opinions, their beliefs about what's acceptable with regard to how we think, acceptable with regard to how we act, like those who lead our organizations, those who influence, and the ideal elusive image that too many of us aspire to. Remember the stats I shared earlier. 93% of human communication is nonverbal. 90% of information transferred to the brain is visual. Has the role of the DE&I practitioner become even more complex? Who are we intentionally excluding by embracing and aspiring to these elusive ideals and images? They are not real. They're certainly not sustainable. And in closing, I ask you, consider the old adage, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Yet we live in a social digital world where many are chasing the notion of the ideal. One more layer of expectation, one more layer of stress, one more layer to undermine another well-known adage of just showing up as you are. Please don't feel compelled to like these introductory remarks. With that, I'm honored to welcome our guest speaker today, Nancy Didia, who has a great perspective on what she calls not the new normal, but the renovated normal. Nancy, welcome.
Thank you, Jackie. To be here, to be with you. And, your opening remarks really resonated with me. So thank you for kicking us off.
Oh, Jackie, you're on mute.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Sorry. I said, Nancy, it really mirrors a lot of the work that you're doing right now at your organization. And I want this audience to just have an opportunity to get to know you as I have. And so I want to start with a little something personal, and it's regarding the significance of the quote, as well as the song that started us off. Talk about either or both of those and tell us what inspired the song, what inspired the quote for you?
Yeah, thanks for acknowledging that song. It's one of my most inspiring songs, and I know it's old. It's over 20 years old, and you know, it's an oldie but a goodie in my heart. And about 21 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer, and I was going through treatment. I was working in a large financial services institution doing diversity and inclusion work, actually. And I realized how important it was for me to stay strong, to not only conquer the illness, but to be able to get better and get well, despite how the medicines made me feel, despite the fact that I lost all my hair and I lost every, every part of hair on my body that you could lose. And I felt horrible, incredibly fatigued. And this song inspired me, even if it was to get that energy to walk 15 minutes a day. I did that, and of course would come home and take a nap for an hour, but still I felt in control. And I like it today because it's very much about what the role of a chief diversity and inclusion officer is about. You got to be strong, you got to stay together, and I think as much as many of us have been involved on the diversity space or the inclusion space, we really have become more corporate social workers, especially in today's sense. There's a lot of psychology that goes into our work, a lot of social psychology, and a lot of compassion and empathy. At the same time, we're expected to be influencers and change agents in transforming cultures. So that song reminds me of my why. And of course, the Maya Angelou quote, and she's brilliant, in terms of the way she just approaches humankind. And I think that in these past 2.5 years, I've never seen so much anger and frustration with people in public and in general, and especially our healthcare workers and people in the hospitality industries that are just treated so rudely. And so for me, it's always, as corny as it sounds, I'm the type of person that would just go up to someone and thank them for showing up on their shift, and whether it was in a doctor's office or anything like that. So I think treating people in that human way and showing gratitude for their being there for you is is necessary. We need to do more of that in the workplace. So I know you want to hear more about the renovated normal, and we'll unpack that, Jackie, as our discussion progresses this morning. But those are really the two reasons why both that song and that quote really inspire me to do my best work.
I so appreciate that. And just your explanation of it was inspirational in and of itself. And by the way, no, I don't think that that's corny to go up and thank someone. I mean, people on the front lines, all of us have been under such tremendous pressure. And I find that when you just enact that just simple act of recognizing someone, I know I've been the recipient of that, and it just brightens my day. And then you go forward wanting to pass that on. So I love that. And thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing so personally with us. I appreciate that. I'd like you to tell us, if you would, a little bit more about Boehringer Ingelheim for those of us who are not familiar. I know that there was a slide that gave us some detail, but you added a little bit of color to the history of your organization and what they're about that I know many of us, when we joined the call earlier, were not familiar with. So can you just familiarize this audience a little bit more about Boehringer Ingelheim?
Yes, absolutely. And, great job on pronouncing the company name. Thank you, Jack.
I had a little help.
We usually tell people just to say BI. That's a lot easier. So we are affectionately known as BI in the pharma space. But Beringer is the family name. We are, as you can see, a family-owned, privately held pharmaceutical organization based in Ingelheim, Germany, which is in the Rhine-Hessen region of Germany, about 20 miles north of Frankfurt, Germany. Beautiful, beautiful land, and our US headquarters, being one of the largest regional operating units for BI, is based in Ridgefield, Connecticut, on approximately 350 private acres that we share. Beautiful campus as well. The campus in Ingelheim, Germany is about 14 acres, really huge. We have about 12,000 employees there at that particular site. And our board of managing directors and the Beringers actually have offices on that site. The company was formed, as you can see, in 1885. So for more than 140 years or so, we've maintained 4 generations of Beringers and the leadership positions. So being able to focus both on the human side and the animal health side is really a wonderful blend of our business. And our company is very philanthropic in terms of giving back. We're very much involved in making more health, which is an initiative that is run out of our corporate headquarters, where we help countries that need clean running water or drinking water. You see a lot of that in other places outside of Europe and outside of the United States as well. So we send our employees on these missions to do this work, which is really kind of a leadership development initiative, as well as a program called Africa Commt, KOMMT. And that's our ability to bring in talent from Africa to work in our industry. And it could be anywhere from central functions, finance, to scientific innovation discovery. So I'm really proud of our company as a whole, the family, being a member of that family. I'm now coming up on 16 years at Beringer Ingelheim. I remember saying 16 years ago, just 5 years, and I'll be out of here. And there's just so many reasons why I've stayed, and so many reasons why I think we're such a caring, dedicated company in the health space with respect to animals. And we go across a variety of species. Many of you, if you have pets, may know our products, NexGard, Frontline. Many of the vaccines your pets receive, we make. We keep the food chain healthy. So we make vaccines for swine, cattle. We also make medicines, in different therapeutic areas for humans, cardiovascular, metabolic conditions, and we're very committed to health equity, not only for humans, but for humans who have animals. Another area of concern for us on the health equity side is the homeless and their pets, and ensuring that their pets and the individuals who are homeless get the right care that they need for their conditions as well. So what I love about BI, just briefly, is we're really an authentic organization. You can truly be your authentic self. And I've always said, I never really felt like I fit in at BI, but I always felt like I belonged. And that's what's kept me here.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right, we're going to come back to that fit and belong. But no, thank you for sharing that. I can certainly understand why you've stayed there as long as you have. It says a lot about you, it says a lot about the organization. So, many of us, as we evolved through this pandemic, not knowing what it was going to lead to, when we were going to get to the proverbial end of it, many of us called this what we were evolving into the new normal. But Nancy, you've called it the renovated normal. which I thought was so cool. So help us understand what's behind this concept of the renovated normal, and what does that look like at BI?
Yeah, the new normal, to me was getting a little played out. And what I mean by that is the renovated normal means that we're back in, we'll be returning in some way back to the institutions or the places of work that we were at in some way.
We have a lockup.
I think it's a way, if you put it onto your home or renovating a kitchen, you still have the kitchen, but you also want to change the way you approach, the way you store your dishes, the way you store your pots and pans. From a workplace perspective, the way that we left in March of 2020 and the way that we're coming back in, whether it's going to be mostly virtual or for moments that matter, it's not going back to, it's renovating in a new way. And that's the difference. So it's not like we're, what's the word? We're not stripping out the kitchen. We're keeping the kitchen intact, but we're renovating what was to be what works for now.
Such a great analogy. So help me understand, how do you then prepare leaders who've not renovated their kitchen, so to speak? So how do you prepare leaders to deal with this renovated normal? How do you keep them motivated?
Well, I think the first part to remember is that all of us are coming at today or this point in time in different ways, with different stories, different experiences that have occurred in the past 2 years that may have directly affected some of us. Some have experienced illness, unfortunately, and loss as a result of the pandemic. And others had, significant home concerns around education for their children, home care, child care, elder care, all of this. So it's really helping leaders to recognize that it's not back to what was, it's back to meeting your people where they're at, even if it's different than where you're at. It's kind of in that category, Jackie, in our work, when we talk about, walk a mile in someone's shoes, or you typically hear, and we heard a lot of this around Black Lives Matter, or, the George Floyd murder, about our Black and Brown colleagues or BIPOC colleagues coming forward and saying, welcome to my world. This has just been going on for years, and suddenly you all are becoming woke. Think about what it feels like for me. And typically what we find is that if people haven't gone through that or have experienced some form of marginalization, it's not real, or it couldn't have happened. And what we try to help managers educate, and a lot of this is some group coaching, some one-on-one coaching, which actually involves me in some ways, meeting with the leaders in groups and small groups to say, here's the deal. Here's, even if you never experienced that, this is real for the other person. And you need to hear that and be compassionate about it. I know you may not relate to it, but their reality has to be accepted by you. And I think helping leaders, and as you know, most leaders are programmed to solve, to fix, right? We see this a lot in gender-related issues as well, where we find a lot of times men want to come in and save the situation, even in your own relationships, right? If you're in a cisgender relationship or a hetero relationship where a male-female situation, you come home, talk to a spouse, sometimes a husband might say, here's what you need to do. Go in there and say that, when in fact, what you really want to hear, what you really want is someone just to listen. You don't want a solution. You just want to be able to vent without anything other than, I hear you, I see you, what you're saying is valued. And that's what belonging is about. So we try to bring the real things in life to the forefront through role playing, through immersive experiences, and also through group coaching by creating a safe space for them to ask difficult questions. I mean, one of the new challenges we're dealing with is to help people globally understand pronoun usage and why that matters.
Mhm. No, I completely appreciate what you just said, because, I mean, think about it. Our nation is pretty divided right now. Our organizations are microcosms of our society. So I would imagine that some leaders get stuck in aspiring to this new normal versus a renovated normal. So I appreciate what you just took us through in terms of kind of the coaching that you provide leaders to help them understand, how do you meet people where they are? I guess what I'm curious about is, you know, how do you anchor them back to your company's values? Excuse me. And how do you feel the need to hold them accountable to that? Because I would imagine if they're stuck in that old way and they don't want to move to this renovated normal in terms of how they retain talent, that can be certainly a negative impact on BI. So where does the accountability factor come in all of this? After you do all of the coaching and if that doesn't work, where's the accountability? How does that work?
Yeah. Well, I think the accountability could be better in terms of holding people to the fire, right? Or holding their feet to the fire to say, you have choices here as a leader. If you don't follow a more inclusive approach or create that safe space, you're not going to you're not going to be able to keep up with the turnover. Mm-hmm. So it's really incumbent upon you, because we are, like every other company, seeing higher rates of turnover than we've ever experienced before. And like many other companies, we're challenged in filling them as quickly as people are departing. And that's a whole other discussion about why people are departing, right?
Sure.
This whole wake-up call about, what am I doing? Where am I? Mm-hmm. You know, is this what I really want to do? But I think helping leaders to really themselves get centered and grounded and share, I see the accountability for them being real and vulnerable. And what I mean is being real. They can't come in here like, hey, everything's great. You know, let's go back to the way it was. We're going out for beers next week. And no, you know, that's not the way to approach it. And I think the accountable pieces have to be the acknowledgement. And it's a work in progress, Jackie. You know, I don't think I'm not here to say to you that we've got it right. I'm here to say to you, we're on it. We're working on it. I wish, you know, that we had it right or perfect, but we're close to calling it out and putting what I consider the hard stuff on the table.
I totally agree with you, Nancy. And I think we're all struggling with this to some degree. I mean, typically, as you said, leaders try to fix things. You know, they're wired to solve. And I think now more than ever, we're going to start seeing a shift of, you know, leaders being measured not just on what they do, but how they get it done, those softer skills. And to your point, the harder skills. And so one more question, and then I'm going to pass it on to Eric, because I know that i4cp has some new research findings that are going to be really interesting to this audience. But I know that leaders respond to data. I'm wondering, are you all measuring the employee's sense of psychological safety at all? And is that data helpful to getting leaders to want to move towards that renovated normal in terms of retaining talent?
Well, one thing I can tell you about our field is that if you have data, you get attention, right? We're a scientific company, so data matters, and data is listened to. You get more attention when you have the right data to tell your story. So yes, and in fact, we are just coming off of a global employee survey that we just closed last Friday. So I'm eagerly awaiting the results, but we've created 2 indices in that survey. One is around empowerment, and the other is around a broader inclusion index. Now, the thing about empowerment to me is very much tied to a space of psychological safety. A lot of times, I think the challenge that we will face with certain leaders is that they believe that empowerment is, of course, Jackie, you could go do that. You know, you're empowered, go make that decision. But that's not what empowerment is, right? Empowerment is feeling safe to oppose someone in a situation that could be challenging, and feeling that you have opposing data or another point of view that could bring more information, and not worry about being shut off or turned off. So empowerment is knowing that the opposing views or diverse viewpoints are welcomed, and you're safe to bring that up without judgment. So I think we've got to work on what we mean by empowerment, and I'm hoping this index will unpack how we want to address it. So yes, we're using that. We're also doing some sentiment surveys monthly, which are really check-in surveys, random pulse checks, essentially. How are you feeling right now with your workload? Or you know, what's your state of mind type of thing on a scale of 1 to 5. And we're asking those same questions quarterly to see how things fluctuate. We share that with the CEO and the country managing team or committee as well. So I do feel like we have the right anchors in place. And as you started out this question, it is around our values, which are, you know, simply around respect, empathy, passion, and trust. And are we reminding people of living those values in a safe and empowering way?
Brilliant. No, that's brilliant, Nancy. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I know the audience is going to have some questions, but so while they're thinking of any questions that they have or any comments that they might have, Eric, I'd love to pass this on to you to share some of the more recent i4cp research findings.
Thank you, Jackie, and hello, everyone. And Nancy, I just want to say that the way you talk about the renovated normal really meshes well with how i4cp talks about culture renovation for companies. It's about honoring the past, keeping what's good in the culture, keeping true to yourself, but then fixing those things that need fixed, and really just focusing on those and making sure that you move forward with the times. So very spot on, I feel, way to look at it, especially coming hopefully out of this pandemic. So the first thing I wanted to show everyone was, for those who haven't already downloaded it, we've got a picture here of i4cp's annual priorities and predictions report. I think we're gonna, yep, we've posted the download there in chat. As in previous years, we've collected the top priorities from the functional heads of i4cp's various working groups. So CHROs, CDOs, talent acquisition leaders, learning and development leaders, total reward leaders, and people analytics leaders. This is one of our top downloads every year, and I can tell you that in this year's version, every function has goals that are related to advancing DE&I in some way or another. Here I'm showing the top 4 priorities we collected from our CDOs, starting with retention, which was mentioned by all of those all of the CDOs who shared their priorities with us. This is a lot more detailed in the report, but this first goal is has a lot about shoring up listening strategies, bias auditing, inclusive leadership training, and diversifying talent sources. So the second priority here, maintaining momentum. This is about maintaining momentum on the DE&I pledges made in 2020 and 2021. I'll share some brand new data on that in just a minute. The third priority is one that we've been talking about a lot lately, making sure that the new flex work practices are equitably handled. I'll share a little new research on that related to our discussion here. And the fourth priority is one that CDOs were also focused on last year as well, and that's shoring up DE&I metrics. This is still a work in progress for most organizations. I know we've had new SEC standards in the US that a lot of people are still trying to interpret in their own way, and there's a lot of follow the leader going on. But that's one of the biggest priorities our CDOs had, was how they want to accurately portray DE&I and their culture and their organizations through metrics. So Nancy, before I move on, other than promoting more inclusive leadership behaviors, which we've talked about a bit at the top of the hour here, are there other retention strategies for diverse employees that you'd like to share? And maybe if so, what are your top areas of focus?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And as usual, i4cp produces such useful, timely research. So kudos to you and your team for capturing our priorities, if you will, not only this year, but in the past years. And again, just a shameless plug for you all and the great work that you do. So, to get back to your question, I think more than ever, we need to have what I would consider a bit more stay strategies, and we've begun doing that, which are more informal coffees, roundtables with the CEO and the leadership team with random colleagues around the business. Now, to the extent that people are on site on those given days, those are examples of what we would call a moment that matters. So if you get an invitation to have the coffee with the CEO or one of his direct reports, it's probably a good idea to show up on site that day and just meet with other people. So we're trying to do that. We're also recognizing that mental health and well-being is crucial. And having an app like Headspace isn't the answer, right? Yeah, it's a tool, but really recognizing that the toll the past 2.5 years has taken on all of us. And I think being able to comfortably talk about that, and it's not just the pandemic, it's the JEDI plus B, right? The justice, equity components of D&I and belonging that CEOs have either dove into or said, I dove in, I'm out of the water now, I've got the towel on, I'm not going further anymore. But I think what's most important is to recognize, just like we all had opening dates and we kept moving those dates out, this is something that we have to make part of who we are. And that also means that we have to be more flexible in talent acquisition, that maybe certain jobs that we thought had to be on site a couple of days a week may only have to be on site once a month. And so we have to look at a lot of these old norms in the renovated way to say, we've got to adjust those requirements to be more accommodating to what talent wants. I mean, let's face it, it's a candidate market, like a buyer's market in real estate, right? In talent, the candidate's calling the shots. Your data shows that.
Yeah, and just to mirror what you said, off the top of my head, I know our research has shown that burnout is the #1 reason for talent loss right now. And right up there at the top of the list is lack of flexibility options. And that one of the best retention strategies we've seen is what you were talking about with the moments that matters. And that's uh, uh, places where you can intersect and learn from and share with senior leaders in the organization. Sometimes through coaching, mentoring, but just a chance to get a sit down and really get a feel for how the organization is moving. So that's awesome. So with that, we'll go to our next slide and look at, this is from some brand new research. This hasn't been put out yet in a study, but we'll have one coming up soon. I believe it'll be called Flexibility or Flight, where we talk about, it's not so much what your structure is in the organization that you've put more flexibility in, or necessarily a hybrid work models or whatever. It's about putting in the maximum amount of flexibility for the most employees that you can, that can be sustained productively within your culture, because employees recognize that businesses are there to make money, and that there's certain ways that can be done better. But it's giving them the flexibility and not being too rigid with how you hang on to that talent. But what we came here is, I know a lot of people have had issues with have or have nots in their culture when it comes to who gets flexible options. In some cases, it's a problem with certain people feel that they don't get those opportunities. And in other cases, it's about those who do get those opportunities who now lack a little bit of visibility within the organization and feel like it's going to hurt their career advancement. So some of the actions that companies have taken: ensuring all employees have thorough onboarding experiences, regardless of work models. That also, that relates also to reboarding, job transitioning, things like that. Making sure that if you're shifting to a new work model, you onboard people into that new role intentionally, and that new model very intentionally, so they know how to operate. Providing equitable opportunities for career development, promotions, and job transfers. I highlighted this one because it's one we've been talking about: providing training for managers on how to ensure inclusion for all, regardless of work models. Provide meeting guidelines that encourage equitable experiences for all meeting participants. Regularly auditing promotions, projects, assignments, and internal movement for possible work model bias. And I personally push bias auditing of all processes. I'll show a little slide on that later, but I feel like that's one of the top things that we can be doing around retention nowadays. So Nancy, so you can see that training managers to be more inclusive is on our list. Are there any other areas we ask about here that you're tapping into as part of your renovated normal?
Yeah, I think, some of the meeting guidelines that you put there, one of the big complaints is running back to back. So we adjusted Outlook to automatically allow scheduling at 25 minutes at the quarter hour. We committed to meetings no more than 25 minutes or 55. So no longer hour meetings. No meetings. We are trying to reserve Fridays for work days. We're trying not to email people after 5 o'clock in the evenings, but yet, people are still, I have to admit, I'm guilty of that myself. I'll go and check at 8 o'clock at night and I see people's lights on as, green, and they're obviously catching up or doing something. But I think one is, what are the systemic things that we can change? Really, I don't want to say forcing people to take PTO, but essentially saying you're not going to get your PTO paid out, so use it or lose it. And even if you're staying home, you need to disconnect, because that's important for you to come back refreshed. I think we're doing a lot of rotations and job swapping as well. So for people to get exposed to different areas in general. And I'm just looking, the regular audit promotions, we've been doing that. So that's nothing new for us. But the new things have been around meeting times, meeting etiquette, and basically, I'm just looking here, the rotation.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I know we've been trying some of those meeting start stop times, changing things up like that the same way. It's a challenge, and no matter what your culture is in your organization, but it's been a big relief where it works. I do know that. So let me just real quick, I wanted to touch on our next slide. This is also from our as yet to be released study, but I thought it would be interesting for this crowd just to see it. This is about DE&I pledges versus the progress made on those. And that's some of the pledges that people made in 2020, 2021, just seeing how momentum has been keeping going on those. What we saw was that those who were reporting that they have made progress to a higher, very high extent on these goals that we have, on the pledges that we have listed here, pretty low compared to what was actually put out there. Now, I know specifically just from looking at the back end of this data that for racial and gender equity in the workplace, if you add in moderate extent, that one will jump up quite a bit. There was a decent amount that felt like they were making moderate progress. And I feel sometimes it's as if there's like just a little bit too many balls being juggled at once. So it's hard to really focus down on just one thing. But just something to be made aware of as we go forward, that a lot of people are still struggling to make those commitments that they did, and that employees and stakeholders are watching. So Nancy, unless you had something you would like to comment on this one, I was going to hand it back to Jackie.
Yeah, just quickly, and thank you, Eric. First of all, I do think that the pledges were a form of social responsibility, in terms of we must do this. So it's easy to put money at something, but I don't think many of the organizations recognize the need for resources to not just write a check, but what's required to make those either institutional or systemic changes. So writing a check is easy. It's changing the processes that are causing the disparities, the marginalization. That takes time. And I think that institutions, as you said, employees are saying, okay, I know you gave money to X, Y, and Z, but we're not seeing anything changing here.
Yeah.
And so I think there was a disconnect between, yes, we're doing this, look at who we gave money to, but the employee experience it doesn't match.
I think that's a spot on analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So Jackie,
Yeah.
back to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Very enlightening, Eric. Thank you for sharing those with us. I just want to take an opportunity to check in with Nina to find out if we have any questions or comments from the audience that you'd like to share at this point.
I think our audience has been just so riveted by the conversation, but the one thing that slid into my inbox here is wanting a little bit of insight on the global perspective on retaining diverse talent. Is there anything that you can share about that, about what works differently outside of the US? And yet you mentioned pronouns a little bit and how that gets carried over outside of the US, but is there other insight that you can offer?
Yes, the whole topic of race outside of the US is a challenging topic, especially if you look at European countries. But what's been happening in Europe with a lot of the migration from some of the Eastern European countries like Turkey and Syria into Germany, or even other parts of Europe, Italy, France, and not really understanding the racial components or even the ethnic components. And as Jackie said earlier, there's not just a polarization here in our country. There is a lot of exclusion. And even, if we have people coming from other continents or other countries working in Europe and they have dark-skinned children in a German environment, those children unfortunately are being subjected to racial epithets and marginalization. So The reality of this is real outside of the workplace, and to not acknowledge it inside the workplace is a mistake. And I think we actually have mobilized a group of our Black colleagues globally to help educate others on what they're experiencing. And that has been incredibly eye-opening and valuable. So not quite an employee resource group, but more of an employee network group that meets with leadership teams and tells their stories. So we've been bringing storytelling in from those colleagues that are in the marginalized groups, if you will, or experiencing that, to help others to understand more. So that's an area that I think we're going to continue to tap at and deepen.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And it's not something that's often talked about, race, and outside of the US. And the only reason I say that is I hearken back to the interview that Oprah did with Meghan and Harry. And the question that Meghan said was asked of her when she was pregnant, what happens if the baby comes out with darker skin? And the fact that that was even a thing, an issue, just that part of the interview continues to haunt me to this day. So I'm really happy to see, Nancy, that you all are focused in such a targeted way outside of the US on race and ethnicity. Again, moments that matter. I know that we are up on the close of the hour. Eric, I know you have a couple of just closing slides that you want to give to this audience. So we're going to move to you very quickly to close out. Nancy, thank you for being our treasured guest today. I look forward to seeing you at the conference. Can't wait to see you. Any of you who are on this line who are coming to the conference, can't wait to see you. And yeah, can't wait to hug you. I'll have my mask on. I'm vaccinated up, but just can't wait to see and touch all of you. So thank you so much, Nancy. You're doing brilliant work.
Thank you to Eric and Nina and all of I4cp. Jackie, you're a great host, and thank you for letting me be me.
Always and all day. Eric, floor is yours. Close us out. Take us home.
Yeah. Nancy, wonderful hour of sharing. I can't believe how fast that went. So just for our closing slides, I want to let everybody know that we have a new study in the field at I4cp called the Talent Imperative. We're doing this in concert with Fortune magazine. The study will be open until February 25th. We'll be talking about a lot of the challenging concerns about attracting, developing, and retaining the right talent. As you can see, we've posted the link to that study in the chat. So please, if you get a chance, go take it. And as a thank you for taking the study, you will receive a copy of the overall results once the survey is closed. We would also, I just wanted to promote our bias audit toolkits that we have out there. This is for I4cp members. We do have ones that go directly into flexible and hybrid work models. Those specifically really cover a lot of the ground that we've talked about today with Nancy. So if you haven't had a chance to download and look at those, please do. We also have ones that cover all the other functional areas of HR. And other than that, I just want to thank everyone for joining us, and I hope you can join us again for future calls. Thank you.